Oh, ain't nothing wrong, okay?
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Black Scientists Cooperative. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Sandra Mcgowan, and she's going to be talking to us about mind maintenance and really how to cope with grief. So, Dr. Mcgowan, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what motivated you to become a healthcare provider?
Sure. So Dr. Sandra Mcgowan. I grew up in Chicago. I went to Limblom Technical High School. And from there, I went to Bradley University, where I was a biology major. Now, my love for science and helping people started way before college. In grammar school, I liked science a lot. I was actually in a gifted science program. So that's kind of where my love for science came. And then in high school, I worked as a candy striper or a volunteer at the hospital. So that's where I kind of started liking helping people. So medicine seemed like the obvious way to go with my love for science, as well as my love for wanting to help people. So I was a biology major in college. After college, I took a year off to take some time to get my grades up, take the MCAT, and apply for medical school. And during that time, I worked in a dental office as basically a receptionist / assistant, whatever the dentist needed help with. And that further helped me realize I did like medicine and that I wanted to go back to school. So I applied for medical school. I didn't get in on my first try, but I did what's called a post-bac program where at University of Illinois, where they paid for me a year of undergrad and graduate level science courses. And if I maintain a B average, I was accepted into the next year's medical school class. And that's how I got into medical school. So I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago Medical School. And after that, I completed my residency in family medicine at Cook County Hospital.
That's amazing. And let me tell y'all about Dr. Mcgowan. She really does have a passion about medicine. She's actually my physician, full disclaimer, and she takes care of my husband. And her passion for science and medicine, it really shines through. She's always very responsive, and she's just done a wonderful job of taking care of both of us. So just wanted to drop those little tidbits in case you're in the Chicagoland area and need a physician.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again, Dr. Mcgowan, for joining us tonight. And so as you're kind of thinking about your background as a family medicine physician, you're probably one of the first point of contacts for a person who is suffering from anxiety, depression, or any type of other mental, I would call it a thing, because I don't want to keep calling it a disorder, because sometimes it's not a disorder, but just need help with some types of mental issues that might be going on. So what do you look for as telltale signs in people that might be dealing with these issues or might be in a point where they might actually need help?
So I would say I'm an observer. So I pay attention to patients as soon as they walk in the door. The way my office is set up, I see people as soon as they walk in. So I watch behaviors. I watch how they interact with the staff. I watch how they even interact with their loved ones. And it helps a lot for me because most of my patients have been my patients for so long, I kind of know them. So when they come in the office, I can gauge by how they say hello or what they say to kind of feel if something's going on. So some of my patients will come in and I'm like, hey, how are you? And they're like, I'm okay, or I'm doing good. And I'll say, you said at first and had to think about it. What's really going on? And I like to think that I have that kind of personality that people feel open to talk to me. So sometimes it's not even having to gauge it. Patients will come in and they'll sit down and say, Dr. Mcgowan, I'm having a bad day. I'm having a bad week. I say, how are you doing? And they won't give the typical, I'm doing good. They'll be like, you know what? I'm not doing good. This is what's going on in my family. This is what's going on at home. And there have been times people come in for a physical and I'm giving them tissue and they're like, I didn't come to the doctor. And these are sometimes new people. I didn't come to the doctor to cry or to tell you this. I came for a physical, but you asked me one question. And I think sometimes just smiling makes people feel warm. Good case in point, I had a patient a few weeks ago came in and she had forgotten her insurance card. So when I went into the room, my receptionist put her in the room and I was like, I asked her, I said, do you have your insurance card? If you don't, please send it to us later today. And she looked at me and she was like, she just started crying. And she was like, my husband is on hospice and they basically just told me he's in the process of dying. And I just left out the house to come to the doctor and forgot everything. And when she said that, I just stopped and I went to her and I touched her hand. And after that, she just started crying and started talking to him. She was in the office for about 45 minutes to an hour. And when she got ready to leave, she said, I had no intentions of coming in here crying to a stranger, but you made me feel comfortable. But sometimes you have to just listen. A lot of times I'll ask a question and give a patient 2 minutes to talk, because in that 2 minutes, I can hear in their voice how they feel. I can hear in their voice what's going on and what it is they want to share. So I think it's just paying attention to cues. And even with new people, it doesn't always have to be somebody I know. Sometimes even people that are brand new to me, you can look, they don't smile, they don't make eye contact. They have short answers to everything. You answer yes or no. Sometimes those are cues that someone's depressed or feeling anxious or feeling uncomfortable. And then I'll ask a probing question and they'll open up.
Wow, it's so awesome to hear you say these things, mainly because a lot of times your experience in going to the doctor is that they are on a time clock. So you feel rushed because you know that they're trying to get to the next patient. So you're not at times feel as connected and feel like they are connected. So you're not likely to share. So I mean, it warms my heart to hear that you've called out times of, well, really that they didn't have a time limit, 45 minutes of hour of just trying to connect. So that's pretty awesome for that. But one of the things that we're in currently and we're still dealing with is COVID-19. And so we know that many people are still dealing with the aftershocks of the pandemic, such as loss of loved ones, marriages falling apart, jobs, livelihood, people lost their homes, etc. So what advice do you have for our viewers that need support to just keep going? Go ahead.
The first thing I would say is, and I see this a lot in the African-American community where people don't want to go get help or talk to someone. The first thing I cannot stress enough is seeking therapy is nothing wrong with. In fact, it's probably one of the best things you can do, because sometimes you need to talk to an unbiased person to help you with your feelings and someone who's educated enough to help you with coping mechanisms to get through whatever it is, especially the pandemic. I think also finding something you like and taking some time for yourself to do the things you like to get your mind off of what is going on. As a practicing physician, I will say since March of last year, I have seen many more people with anxiety, depression, being OCD, especially with the hand washing, and I want to touch people and touch things. So I think we are now living in a society, and I was talking to a friend who's a therapist the other day. I don't think we've even touched the surface of how this pandemic is going to affect our world and affect our minds. I mean, we've taken kids out of school for a whole year and left them at home. Kids need to be in social environments. We have taken people and kept them in their houses. I have elderly patients who have been sitting at home. Had one patient, she had not been out the house since March of last year until March of this year. She had only been out the house twice. And that was one time to come to the doctor to see me. And another time was to go to the lab to get blood work. She was staying in the house. And the only person she was letting in the house was her son. So to me, that's causing people to, have more depression, more feeling lonely. And when you're alone and feeling lonely, you start thinking about the wrong things. So I think the isolation is going to harm a lot of people. The not being in a work environment, not being able to interact with our friends. So I think the first thing is being able to recognize that you need help and that is nothing wrong with getting help and talking to someone, and whoever that may be, whether that's, your pastor or going to talk to a clinical psychologist or some clinician. But I think talking to somebody is one. Two, self-care, taking time to do things for yourself, finding things that you can do that's safe to do in this environment, in this climate that we're living in. And three, if your depression or anxiety is really bad, being open with yourself and talking to your doctor about getting medications or things you need. And full disclosure, transparency with myself. So my husband and my mother-in-law both had COVID and passed away. And for me, therapy was something I knew I needed to do, just to talk through my feelings and to even talk through the guilt of being a physician and couldn't save the people I love, or was I the one who brought it home? And having therapy has helped me significantly. And I'm still seeing a counselor. I think it's something now that I'll probably do for the rest of my life, because it helps to be able to bounce ideas off and talk to someone. I have a 12-year-old. She sees a therapist and she won't admit that it's helping and she likes it, but she looks forward to those sessions to be able to talk and to write it out. And that's another thing, journaling and writing how you feel. I think those are tools we don't utilize enough. As people, as a Black female, we've always been told, toughen up, don't let it get you down, you strong. And I tell people all the time, there's nothing wrong with being strong. Being strong is not a weakness and it's not a bad thing. You can be resilient and still have moments where you feel weak and want to cry and want to express your feelings, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think just being open with your feelings and being open to accepting help.
So I know you alluded to this in some of the answer to that question, but I kind of want to delve a little bit deeper into how the landscape of mental coping and grief have been altered during the pandemic. So, that interaction that you alluded to, that isolation, how has that changed during this pandemic and being in isolation, and what does that look like now? And maybe we can even extrapolate, how we ease back into, some of those mechanisms of coping that weren't available, quite frankly, because of the lack of interaction with people.
So that's a hard one. And I think now with us opening things up in the world, it's kind of hard to see how it happens. I mean, as a physician, what I have noticed is some people come in and they honestly tell me, this pandemic has been hard. I need some help in coping or getting through. And then there are people who come through and say, the pandemic put me through a lot of things, and I realized that it's important to take care of myself. I've had a lot of patients come in now who were workaholics and realized that how precious life was, whether they had a loved one die, or even I've had patients who had COVID and they survived. And now they see life differently. So they're more likely to do self-care. They're more likely to talk to someone. I have seen more patients in the last 6 months to a year open to therapy, and even coming in telling me, well, Dr. Mcgowan, I already have talked to a therapist about how I feel. So I think we're getting to a point where we are open and realizing that is one way to cope, is to get help. As you mentioned earlier, people have now been stuck in the house with their husbands or their wives, and they're realizing that they have some dysfunctional things going on in their family life. And I've had patients come in and tell me, we started seeing a family therapist because after being at home for a couple of months, we realized that if this lasted any longer, our marriage was going to suffer, and we didn't want that to happen. So I think we are getting to a point where people are more open. Now the issue is having the providers available, having mental health counselors available, and insurances paying for it, or people even having the insurance to cover it.
So just to piggyback off of that, as a physician, are you now more open and available to other means of seeing patients, meaning virtual visits, Zoom and things of that nature? Are you still utilizing those platforms?
I am. So the pandemic taught me one thing, that everything that needs to be taken care of medically does not need to come into the doctor's office. So I have done a lot of televisits. In the beginning, pretty much anybody who had a cough, sore throat, sniffle, shortness of breath, anything that sounded like it could be an infection, fever, nausea, vomiting, I did a televisit with. And then I've gotten to the point now where if there are things that people really don't need to come in, if you need to go over your labs, your diabetes labs, why waste a trip coming to the office when we can do a Zoom visit? I'm looking at your lab results. I can tell you what to do. We have the technology. You can check your blood pressure at home and show it to me, and I can see it. So I think the pandemic is going to show us that we can do more virtual medicine, which is a good thing because then it frees up the office for things that really need to be seen. I've also done a lot of mental health counseling with patients via Zoom. Somebody calls today and say, I'm having this anxiety, I'm feeling depressed. I said, hey, you want to do a Zoom visit? I have 15 minutes in between a person so that they don't have to come out the house, especially because there were a lot of people who were really fearful of coming into a doctor's office. So I think for me, I know I've used Zoom and virtual visits more, even more telephone visits, text messaging patients for visits. All of the technology that we have available, I have been using for visits, and I think it has worked well.
So, Dr. Mcgowan, just to kind of wrap up our episode tonight, one of the things I want to touch on is your decision to enter into private practice. One of the things on your website touches on the fact that you practice holistic medicine, right? And you've touched on it a lot throughout this episode, but can you just expand a little bit more on what that looks like through your eyes? And then talk about what key areas a person should focus on to ensure that they are truly practicing self-care. Because self-care in this society is kind of thrown around a lot. It's kind of a buzzword. And I think a lot of people think practice self-care, I'm gonna go get my nails done and go to the spa. But, what does the true practice of self-care look like?
So that was a good question. So self-care for me. So you asked about, so recently I started my private practice. Before then, I worked for a large medical group in the Chicagoland area. And I can honestly say that I was burned out and I was not practicing self-care. So what did that look like for me? Going to work at 7:30 in the morning, staying at work till 4:30, 5 o'clock, maybe having a 5 or 10 minute lunch break at my desk, coming home, still having 2 or 3 hours worth of paperwork to do. Mind you, I had a young child who needed help with homework, who had activities she was in. I had a husband. So coming home, having to think about if we're going to eat dinner home cooked or was I going to buy food? Who was going to take her to activities? If he took her, was I going to pick her up, or was it going to be one of those days I had so much work to do, daddy had to do everything? So I came to a point where I realized that I wasn't practicing self-care. And if I would have continued at the rate I was going, I would have gotten to the point where I hated medicine and hating practicing medicine. And I knew it was time to do something different. So for me, self-care was leaving a well-paying job and reevaluating what was important to me in life. And what I realized is what was important, my family, but I love being a doctor. Without a doubt, I tell people all the time, if I could practice medicine for free, I would, but I still have bills to be paid, but I love what I do. And I love taking care of my patients. But when I was at my previous job, I was doing it at the expense of my own health. So now I get to practice medicine the way I want. So no more 15 minutes visits. Most of my patients have a 20, 30, or 40-minute visit. If I take a long time with one person, the next person isn't upset because they know that the same time I spend with that person, they're going to get the same type of care. So they're open and willing to it. But I usually never run into that because I have freedom to schedule my patients the way I want to. So it's nothing for a patient to come in and we sit there and talk 15 minutes about life. And to me, that's holistic because listening to them talk about their family, what's going on at home, what's going on at work, helps me actually provide better medical care for them. Because if I'm listening, they tell me, well, they're busy, they're not eating right. I know, okay, this is why her diabetes is uncontrolled because she's eating snacks. She's not exercising because she doesn't have time. So it gives me the opportunity to sit down and say, hey, what is it what one thing could we do, or where can we put some extra time in a day for you to do this, to take care of yourself, to make your diabetes better, your high blood pressure better. So I think self-care is not just, like you said, the spa, the nails, the hair, those things are included, but just doing something for yourself. If your mother taking 30 minutes and going into the room by yourself, or walking, or doing something alone, and not to feel guilty about it. Because what I have found is women, we always feel guilty if we are doing something for ourselves and not doing something for our children. But I always tell patients, if mama's sick, who gonna take care of everybody then? So you got to take care of yourself so that you can take care of them. And if that means taking an hour every day to go for a walk by yourself, you have to do it. So that's how I went into private practice. That's what I mean about taking care of the whole person, is looking at everything and helping you figure out what it is you want to do. And that's what self-care is, taking care of you. Because if you're not healthy, you can't take care of the people that you love and care about.
That's it. That is it. Dr. Mcgowan, tell our viewers where they can find you if they're looking for a physician.
Okay. So my practice is in Flossmoor, Illinois. My exact address is 19710 Governor's Highway, Suite 2, and that's in Flossmoor, Illinois. If you Google my name, you'll find me, and all of the information is there. And I love, like I've said before, I love taking care of people. I love getting to know my patients. I won't say I have favorite things I like, but I really like young patients, especially young adults who are interested in science and STEM and all of that. I really love taking care of the young people because you can make such a big impact on their lives. But I love taking care of families too. So I love taking care of spouses, their children. I have one family, I'm taking care of 4 generations in that family. And I like that because it means that they trust me. They have brought their children, their grandchildren. They trust that I'm going to make the right decisions.
Well, this is the perfect way to wrap up our mind maintenance series. Dr. Mcgowan, we thank you so much for coming on the show. This has truly been a blessing and an eye-opening experience. Viewers, we have said it time and time again, take care of yourself and find yourself a physician that cares about you and your well-being and is going to take the time to make sure you're good. This is so important. It's so critical. So thank you for joining us for this episode of the Black Scientists Cooperative. We hope you'll come back and see us for the next one. Have a good night.
Deep flows like a breeze flowing through me, from my head to my feet. Your love runs smooth, ooh, it soothes, and you're making life bright. I'm so glad that you're mine, yeah, 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 yeah.